Adam, good to see you. I know you've been on live now talking about this before. What happens on Sunday for everyone who has TikTok on their phone, who uses it on a daily basis? What happens?
Well, as you said, the big question mark is, does the Supreme Court say anything? And so I want to say that this is what we expect to happen absent Supreme Court involvement, so Supreme Court ruling. But I would say, based on the arguments we heard at the Supreme Court last Friday, I don't expect them to save TikTok. So what happens? We know that the law that Congress passed says that app stores, so the Apple App Store and Google Play Store, cannot provide TikTok as a new download as of Sunday. We also suspect, though it's never been confirmed, that any US company cannot host TikTok. So much of TikTok user data is on Oracle services. Oracle's an American company. And so there's been some speculation that it couldn't, the user data for existing users would maybe have to be moved to offshore servers, data centers after Sunday, or to make sure that it's still operable for existing TikTok users. The big question mark is that there have been multiple news reports in the last day that TikTok plans to actually just take the app dark for all Americans, even existing users, not try to move it to offshore data centers, perhaps to show the American people what they'd be losing, perhaps in some kind of strategy to try to get some salvation after that. But that is apparently the company's plan. Well, we don't know that for certain, but that's been reported the last couple of days.
So it seems like there's a failure of imagination kind of going on here because there's so many users daily on TikTok to the tune of, 150 million. We just don't know what that landscape looks like. And maybe we will on Sunday, and maybe we won't. But the Biden administration and even some lawmakers who voted for this ban in the first place have come out in recent days and have hedged quite a lot here, saying that they would prefer a delay of implementation. Even the incoming Trump-Vance administration has taken that tack as well. I did not know you could do that with U.S. law that's being adjudicated at the highest court in the land. We have this statement on background from a White House official. They say, quote, "Our position on this has been clear. TikTok should continue to operate under American ownership, given the timing of when it goes into effect over a holiday weekend, a day before inauguration. It will be up to the next administration to implement." So the Biden-Harris administration leaving the White House, and they're not actively going to enforce this. What do you make of that?
Well, the law that Congress passed does say that this deadline of Sunday, that whoever is president at the time could grant a 90-day extension to that deadline to give ByteDance, which is TikTok's parent company, more time to find a buyer. So that authority exists solely with President Biden and candidly does not, in my view, extend to President Trump. That's not something that he has the ability to do. The real problem, though, is that ByteDance has shown zero indication of wanting to find a buyer. There are real questions about whether the Chinese government, which ultimately ByteDance has to abide by, will let ByteDance sell TikTok to an American company. And they haven't done anything. This has been, 6 months plus where they could have been making efforts to sell the service, but they haven't. And so I'm very doubtful that any extension of time would lead to any different result. I don't believe the Chinese government wants to allow ByteDance to sell TikTok to anyone.
But TikTok all along has cited free speech grounds as the rationale to fight this. But if you're ByteDance, the parent company, they're not necessarily taking that track here. What do you think their move is? I mean, what will ByteDance do if they don't want it to be sold to an American entity, and there was that report that they might shut it down altogether? That underscores the national security grounds, does it not?
Absolutely. Look, if TikTok was just some harmless video app, I'm not sure the Chinese government would have dug its heels in so deeply to prevent the sale. So the fact that they're resisting it so strongly kind of lends credence to people who say China views TikTok as a national security asset. So I think we ought to view those kind of protests as validation of the original concerns that people have had with TikTok. But I think, if this was a kind of a normal, if China was kind of a normal country and this was a normal company, I think they would have sold the company to an American owner because it would be validation. Here was a Chinese corporate success story. But I don't believe that's going to happen, because now I think what will happen is it probably will go dark, and President Xi can say, well, look, to the Chinese people, look, this is just another example of those awful Americans mistreating us. They'll use it for domestic propaganda purposes.
So what's so interesting, there seems to be some cognitive dissonance going on here, especially amongst Republicans who arguably are hawks when it comes to China. But they are seemingly singing a different tune here. Incoming National Security Advisor, the Congressman Mike Waltz, he was on Fox the other day. He says the incoming administration will put measures in place to keep TikTok from going dark there. So how do you square those two things? If it is such a national security concern, if China is harvesting data with American users via ByteDance, yet the incoming administration wants to keep it in place or at least delay the implementation, is there a disconnect there?
Yes, and it's all because of Trump. And I want to be clear, this is not about really Republicans. Most Republicans in Congress are still concerned about TikTok's Chinese ownership. But Mike Waltz, used to be a TikTok critic. Now he works for President Trump. Brendan Carr, the FCC chair, incoming FCC chair, used to be a TikTok critic. Now works for President Trump. Trump flip-flopped on China, and he flip-flopped soon after one of his major donors talked to him last year. As one of his major donors is a major U.S. investor in TikTok, and and since the election, TikTok executives have gotten in front of Trump and said, "Hey, Trump, look how well your campaign performed on TikTok," playing to his ego. Look, Trump governs from ego, not ideology, and so but I don't think just because Trump has flip-flopped, I don't think that means most members of Congress have flip-flopped. I actually believe members of Congress have actually written to Apple and Google and Oracle in recent weeks saying, we still expect you to abide by this law, regardless of what Trump or Biden say.
But there are even some Democratic senators who voted for the ban in the first place. I'm thinking Ed Markey of Massachusetts. Today, he introduced legislation to delay the implementation of this ban here. So where are they coming from? Why do they want this delayed?
I think it's just downright weird. They voted for this thing.
Yeah.
They voted for this thing. Yeah, it's bizarre. It's not the. It's certainly not a spine of steel. Look, TikTok has had plenty of time to find a new owner. The fact that they haven't really should just validate Congress's original concerns. I get it, the politicians don't want to be held responsible, but this was all foreseeable. I think it's perfectly acceptable to say TikTok's a great app. We just don't want to have Chinese ownership of one of our most important social media apps. That's was the line that Congress drew last year. It was pretty overwhelming. I think that's where still most members of Congress are.